What's the first thing you would recommend for people listening about how to start to shift or change a culture?
Become the servant leader that is the giver.
Culture is driven by leadership. Who are you busy being as a leader?
You have to have a map, and that's the start, is being able to communicate, connect, and get the commitment and the caring within your team. There's this synergism that happens when you become a team.
In a culture where you connect the dots, but as the leader, you have to be in the game. You have to be getting the experience.
Culture is the single most important thing that drives performance.
Welcome to the Leadership in Love podcast. We will cover leadership, mindset, personal development, and sales and marketing. You will experience thought-provoking conversations with both nationally and internationally recognized leaders. Our goal is to inspire you and deliver actionable items that you can implement that are going to help you accelerate your growth. Get ready to discover the magic and the power when you lead with love.
Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of Leadership in Love. I'm your host, Louie Sharp, and this week my guest is a dear friend and a very funny man, Dennis Mellen. Dennis Mellen and I met at a networking event in an organization called Engaging Speakers, and we found out pretty quick that he had spent time in the Air Force and I'd spent time in the Marines, and so we've been making fun of each other ever since. Dennis was obviously in the Air Force as a pilot. He flew cargo planes, and then he also ended up as a commercial airline pilot, much like one of the guests we had a couple weeks ago. So Dennis, welcome. And if you'd like to add anything to your introduction, please feel free to tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, actually, it was a cargo plane, but it was a tanker. KC-10 is what I spent most of my career in the Air Force. I retired in 1996 there. And at the same time, I was working as the fleet captain at Alaska Airlines for the MD-80 fleet at the time. So I've got a pretty good background in leadership, at least stumbling through, and I can pass on some anecdotes and things that I learned from the University of Hard Knocks. Not the most brilliant or sharpest tool in the toolbox, but a lot of experience, just like you've had.
Right. Well, and if you were the sharpest tool in the toolbox, you'd have been in the Marines, not the Air Force. So one of the things that I'd like to share with the audience is, and you'll see that kind of humor go on the rest of this conversation, but Dennis is now a leadership speaker and coach, and one of the things he specializes in culture. So Dennis, the first thing I'd like to ask today is if you could share with the audience and I think that's important because culture runs both in companies and organizations as well as families. What's the first thing you would recommend for people listening about how to start to shift or change a culture?
Well, leaders are the single biggest influencers to culture and performance. So if you can turn yourself, or not necessarily turn yourself, but become the servant leader that is the giver. What is it you need to be successful today should be almost a standard question that you ask of every employee or every team member. We've all seen this. We saw it in the World Series this last year. The Dodgers had gone through a team culture metamorphosis using John Gordon principles, which I'm a certified trainer with. And the New York Yankees had all these stars. And the star performers, unless they come together as a team, will never equate to what a rock solid team can do and what they can accomplish. And both you and I have seen that both in the Marines and the Air Force. The camaraderie, the esprit de corps, the willingness to go that extra step to create that environment where you become more than what you appear to on paper to be.
Yeah, and so there's two I call them golden nuggets, Dennis, that you dropped. One of them I want the audience to catch is that culture is driven by leadership. I'll repeat that, and because this is the gold mine right here. Culture is driven by leadership. The other thing that Dennis spoke about is who are you busy being as a leader? So Dennis, I'd like to dive a little deeper into that. So when you go into an organization or a company and they're struggling in culture, what do you do for your coaching or your wisdom and advice on how to understand where somebody is right now and start to get them to change their mindset around leadership on who they want to be to grow that culture?
That's a really great question, Louie, and it starts with well, I like to tell a story. Like if you and I were getting ready to drive down to Disney World together, we could go through Memphis, we could go through Nashville, we could go through Knoxville. We could pick any direction to go to Disney World, with the ultimate goal of being Disney World. But just like when we're driving at night, your headlights only cover 200 feet. You have to take care of that 200 feet, and then the next 200 feet, and the next 200 feet, till you finally get to your goal. Now, the way to develop that is you've got to create that environment within your team where those, I like to call them those positive, purposeful, and productive conversations are routine. So I map them out, a route for them using the 4 C's. You got to start with being able to communicate with your team, open communications. You have to be able to make a connection there. And that's when you start getting that commitment and caring within your team. And that's basically the roadmap of how, of what you need to do. Now, how you accomplish that involves a lot more details and a lot more coaching, but at least that's the map. And if we're starting out to go to Disney World as our goal, you have to have a map. And that's the start, is being able to communicate, connect, and get the commitment and the caring within your team.
So who do they need to be, Dennis, as a leader to implement and apply your 4 C's? Who do they need to be busy being in that role?
Well, I think it starts with a commitment to being a giver, being that servant leader that is there for not to solve every single problem, but to get that energy from the, let's say you have 10 employees, 10 people on your team, being able to get everything from the extrovert to the introvert to commit to the goal or the key performance indicators, or the ultimate goal that you're trying to achieve, whatever your business is. And it can easily start with creating a mission statement. Something, this is where we're going. We're going to Disney World, and we're going to bring as many people as we can. Creating a vision. Those are the individual goals that you develop, and then having a set of principles that are uncompromised. And as we travel down this road, it's easy to get distracted. Oh, here's a place in Nashville to go see country music or something. But we have to keep in mind our goal is to reach Disney World and to be entertained down at Disney World. Whatever your ultimate mission is, you have to keep that in the forefront with every decision, with every meeting, with every commitment that you make to that you're committed to reaching that ultimate goal, your mission.
So I'd like to, again, Dennis is dropping a couple of golden nuggets here. But again, it's the servant leader. I'll bring this book up again because I think it's worth the read. It's called 11 Rings by Phil Jackson. And in that, I've said this and shared this before, in that book, when he was coaching the Chicago Bulls, every year he would buy a book for the members of his team. And he didn't buy them all the same book. He knew each one of them well enough individually to buy them books that was something they were interested in. I'd also like to reiterate something that Dennis said that's very powerful. Vision, mission, he calls them principles, I call them core values. What are the core values that you're operating on? You need to know that. Your mission, how do you do what you do on a regular basis? And is the team tied to this vision of where you want to go at the end of the day? Dennis, when you go into an organization and they're lacking these things, any one of the three, their principles, a mission statement, or a vision statement, what are your suggestions to our listeners on how to create those and find them with tied to their purpose and love for what they're doing to start helping get that message to the team, to communicate that to the team.
Well, let me back up because it's easier to remember. I call it my MVP program. In sports, it's always referred to as most valuable player. But in a team, it's your mission, your vision, and your principles. And it can't be something that comes from the leader. It has to be something that you sit down with the entire group. Here's the product, here's the service that we provide. What is our mission? Campbell's soup might have been to provide nourishment to people worldwide on a daily basis. That's kind of a paraphrase of what Doug Conant used to repeat. And by allowing not all the employees, but some of them to come in and develop this mission, vision, and principles, you get a connection with those that are participating. And it's like, well, you and I have talked about it before. It's like being that tiny coffee bean that jumps into that roiling, boiling pot of water that is business and starts spreading their influence. So by bringing these employees in to create this mission, vision, and principles, you're creating coffee beans to go back into the business and start spreading their influence with the ultimate goal of creating that gourmet coffee state where you feel like I get to go to work instead of I have to go to work. And imagine how inspiring that is, how much more work you're going to get out of somebody that over and above somebody that's just showing up and collecting a paycheck. When they're committed to the mission, vision, and principles, they see where their goals tie in with the company's goals, and they're more inspired. And if they can't do that, that's when we either need to coach them up or we need to let them go, because there's this synergism that happens when you become a team and you're all working towards the same direction, same goal.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I've experienced it on both sides. Again, for our listeners, Dennis touched on something that's very, very powerful. And I learned this from a mentor of mine years ago at this point. And he used to say all the time, do it with them, not to them. So if you're a leader listening to this, I would ask yourself to do some self-reflection. People that you're leading, are you doing it to them or are you doing it with them? Because Dennis just gave you some wisdom that you really want to apply for the rest of your life as a leader. You want to bring them in and get their input. Dennis, when leaders are struggling to find clarity around that, or their team is struggling around the clarity around the mission, vision, and principles, what are your tools that you use to give them guidance to kind of get clarity on why it's important and what's important?
Well, I think it's important to really get off-site as a group, get away from the work area, have a workshop, even if it's within your own team. But it's better to have a mentor there to guide with some guidance to try and develop this mission, vision, and principles that will drive your team. If you can get away from the workspace, people are more apt to open up, and the ideas flow better. And if you're offsite coaching a group, oftentimes I find I learn more myself from listening to all the inputs that occur than I think the participants get. I've used a lot of the things that I've learned in some of these workshops to use or to coach leaders on some of the experiences that other people have had. There's nothing that replaces. You can study books, you can study, go to school on it, get degrees, but until you actually experience using the tools or can sit down and talk with somebody that's been through those experiences, you don't get the full effect. It's like we talk about leaders coming in. Oh, I've got an MBA, I've got a PhD, but maybe they don't have the years of experience that you do in the Marines or that I have with some of the experiences I've had. Bringing those experiences into a group allows you to get the different perspectives, the different experiences without actually having to go through them yourself.
Yeah, that's very powerful. And again, I want the audience to catch what Dennis is sharing here, and that is that you've got to get in the game, right? You can't sit on the sidelines. And I just had this conversation recently, Dennis, with somebody about music, and we were talking about it, and I told them, you can sit at home and practice an instrument until you're blue in the face, but until you get out and play music with other people, you don't have that experience of what it's like to be in a band and be connected to that band. And that's exactly what you're talking about with in a culture where you connect the dots. But as the leader, you have to be in the game. You have to be getting the experience. And I love that Dennis touched on something else. I think that regardless of who you are, and Dennis is a leader of leaders, he's always learning. And he's learning from people that aren't necessarily the head of the organization, but they've got wisdom and insight because they see that thing from a specific perspective that you might not necessarily catch as the leader of the organization in the day-to-day operations. Dennis, that leads me to my next question. How would you suggest leaders kind of gather and keep this information? Because it's one thing to have this meeting. Now, I want to stress what else Dennis said. Dennis said, get out of the environment. I agree with that. Very powerful to get them out of the environment.
Having these workshops, having these mentors, having these coaches, it's not a one and done thing. Just because, I went to a leadership workshop last week, I've got all this new information. Go out, the importance of going out and putting it into place, making the change. It's really hard to make a change. Making the change in your personality, the way you approach things, the way you adapt.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that it's an ongoing thing. And Zig Ziglar used to say this all the time, right? He said that there's a reason why we bathe every day, much like motivation. There's a reason why we want to do something that's going to motivate us every day because it doesn't stick. Just like bathing, you're going to get dirty. You have to do it again. So Dennis's point that I want everybody to catch is that simple fact that you can't have a team meeting once and not ever do anything again. You can't bring somebody in to coach the culture and think a one-time shot's going to fix it because it really needs to be repeated until it becomes the habit and the culture of the organization. The other thing that Dennis touched on there is you want to continue to go back on a regular basis. And his first C is communication, and communicate that I heard you. It's really important for them to be heard. And also that you might not have accomplished or completed what they were wanting, but you're still working on it and headed in that direction. Dennis, what's the biggest thing that you see, or the biggest challenge companies have around culture?
It goes to, I think it's a Stephen Covey story, where he's walking out in a forest, and he comes upon a gentleman that's chopping down a tree. He says, "Hey there, what you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm chopping this tree down. How's it going?" "Oh, I've been at it for about 3 hours. Have you thought about sharpening your axe?" "I haven't got time to sharpen my axe." Well, same thing with leadership. Almost 100% people buy into, I need some leadership training, but finding the time to do it, finding that time to sharpen the axe, they haven't got time because it doesn't show up on a financial statement. It doesn't show up on your key performance indicators. Our leadership is an 8 and we're moving towards a 9. It's not easily measurable, but over a period of time, periodically updating, having your seminars, having your lunch and learns, having your workshops, you start developing that culture where you have those open communications, where, like I mentioned before, those positive, purposeful, and productive conversations without fear of retribution or shame, where you get the introverts to speak out. It's easy. There's usually one or two people that dominate meetings. But if now neither one of us will be described as shy, but let's say, "Hey, Louie, what's your input on this today? What are you thinking? Or how would you handle this differently? Or what have you seen?" Drawing out the introverted Louis and the introverted Dennises is so important to creating that culture where no matter what's thrown at us, we're going to do what we can to alter, change, or affect the outcome.
So Dennis just hit that. But boy, you're hitting this baby out of the park. You hear what he just said? We're doing what we can to change and affect the outcome. And one of the things that I think is critical here that Dennis is talking about is that in that engagement, you want everybody to speak. I just recently read, I might have read it or heard it about, I think I heard it from Simon Sinek, who said, the speaker, you should speak last, right? And then that way the room has the space to be heard. One of the things that I think is interesting is that in these cultures, it's often challenging. I'd like you to talk about the effect of one negative person in an organization, and what's your advice in coaching to a leader who's struggling with that one chucklehead and you know, like I know, that one chucklehead can drag the whole team down.
Yeah, I refer to those as energy vampires, the ones that walk into a meeting and just suck the energy out of that meeting. Well, you've got to be able to coach them up. You've got to be able to create that environment where, yeah, his or her input's important, but it can't be just a complaint. If you're going to complain, you better have a solution to it. Here's what we should do to fix this. Otherwise, we're just mindless complaining is what's happening. It's just if we have that kind of environment, nothing's going to get done. Oh, we tried that before, that didn't work. That will never work. That's a dumb idea. That's suppressing ideas. That's sucking the energy out of the discussion. As leaders, well, as businesses, really, events are coming at us all the time. There's nothing we could do. COVID comes, late suppliers, absenteeism. These problems are constantly coming at us. And whatever we do, whether we do nothing or whether we do something, there's still going to be an outcome. So our jobs as leaders is when that event comes, what's our positive reaction? What are we going to do to alter, change, or affect that outcome? And we may not be able to do anything, but we have to try to do something. We may be overcome by events and the outcome is predetermined, but we're going to do everything we can to alter, change, or affect that outcome. And we need the input of every team member on that. That's so important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so Dennis just touched on something else. Everybody's input matters. One of the things that I would suggest to the audience, and I've practiced this and experienced it, is get a flip chart or a whiteboard. And if somebody has an idea, you simply write it down. And then you just ask for the next idea. You let them flow with those ideas, because at that point, Dennis, you're right. They're being heard, and they're going to speak up more. And then you put all of them on one place, and then you can take a look at it and say, okay, if we could have impact, which one would we do first? When you go into organizations, and I know you travel across the country and you speak and coach on leadership. When you go into an organization, what's one of the things that you do to assess the culture so you can help them decide what the next steps are to help affect change in that?
That's an interesting thing. A lot of times, I think the average coach goes in and go, oh, I have all these ideas. Let's try this. Let's try that. The first thing to do is go in and see how the meetings are run. How do the meetings run? How often do they have meetings? Are they needless meeting? How is it conducted? Is the agenda entirely controlled by the leader of the group? Are there individuals that are dominating it? You start kind of getting a feel. It's almost like a report card for the way they're running their business right now. That's what culture is all about. The way we do things on a daily basis, the way we interact with each other. It can be one of those awful ones where, aha, Louie, I caught you making a mistake. Don't do that, and start punishing right away. Or it can be one where, Louie, that one's not working out. That's one way that doesn't work. It's a Thomas Edison thing, the light bulb. They was asked, "Hey, how many times did you fail to in your experiments?" He said, "I didn't fail. I tried 10,000 ways that didn't work." You know, instead of punishing the input. If somebody's doing something intentional, if somebody's an energy vampire and you can't convert them, yes, that's when we start easing them out or firing them. But you can coach a person to inspire them to participate in these discussions, and that their input is valuable, because you may miss out on an opportunity or an option to alter, change, or affect the outcome of something. It's just there's no point in business where we say, "Oh, we've got everything handled." You know, everything, nothing's going to change. Maybe if we're well, I wouldn't even say bookstores. I'm sure there's dynamic things happening in bookstores too. But in a dynamic environment like in a Marine squadron or on Alaska Airlines, things are happening on a daily basis. How do you create that environment where we're working together on this? We're trying to get things better, trying to reach that mission statement and vision that we have.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, again, for those of you listening, Dennis touched on something very important, and he didn't use the word, but I'm going to use the word here, and that's the process, right? If something's not working and you fail, then you go back and change your process. And one of the things I share with people, Dennis, is that they're only going to have two challenges, one of two challenges, either a people challenge or a process challenge, right? And so if we're doing something and it's failing, then if I know I've got somebody that's on my team, then I'm going to go look at that process and figure out what has to be different in that process to get the result. I'd like you to talk a little bit about decision making, because you've got your MVP acronym: mission, vision, and principles. I'd like you to share with our listeners why those three things are so important in decision making.
Well, first of all, decisions, there are decisions that have to be made on the spot, no questions asked. And as a Marine, you're fully aware, if we're charging a machine gun nest, it's not time to go, "Well, you know what, I think we should, no, maybe we should," there's no, you need to flank it this way, you need to frontal assault this way, whatever. That's one way. There are decisions that have to be made in the cockpit where there's immediate action items that have to be done. Well, it's the same thing in business. There are occasions where, and it's good to have plans in place or processes in place to handle it. But there are things that happen that have to be taken care of right now. But if you have the luxury of being able to see what's see what can be done to bring in team members on it. The Air Force has a process, and I know businesses have a different. There's all kinds of acronyms. They call it a OODA loop, OODA, and it's observe what's going on, orient yourself, decide on what you're going to do, and then take action. And once you take action, you circle back to observe. Did it fix it? Well, it's the same process that needs to be done within a team. And it can't be, unless we're charging a machine gun nest, it can't be relying on Louie the leader or Dennis the leader to make all the decisions. I just wrote an article, a newsletter in LinkedIn about this very issue. If you're walking away from a meeting and everybody seems to be in agreement on it, and there was no disagreement and everything, then it all came from the leader or the leadership. There was no input, that you're not going to have that optimum solution or that optimum process in place, because everybody's just relying on the leader. That's the epitome of micromanaging right there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the other thing I'd like to add for our listeners is keep in mind when Dennis has had a great point. It's funny because I told somebody this just the other day, Dennis. They were saying they were feeling stressed, and I said, "Look, nobody's shooting at us, right? That's what we're doing isn't that stressful." But one of the things I want you listeners to go away with, what Dennis is talking about, is there are some times when a decision has to be made immediately. He's absolutely right. And there's the times when you have time to think about it. In those times when you have time to think about it, I'd like you to realize that Dennis is talking about mission, vision, and principles, because those are the things that guide your decision making, right? Who do we want to be? What do we want to be? Where are we going? What are our defining principles? And so when you have those clearly, then decision making gets to be a whole lot easier. And Dennis, I would ask, isn't that also applicable when you have that employee when you're on the fence? Should they stay or should they go?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing is when it's intentional infractions, hands down, there's no question. There needs to be discipline or possibly firing. But the fact that if you can rehabilitate that employee, I mean, you've got, what do they say? It takes about 1.5 years to replace an employee for them to get the flavor of what the culture is, where they fit in that culture, where they fit in the scheme of things, what their job is. So it takes about 1.5 years. If you let somebody go, if you fire them, when you could have rehabilitated, you're costing yourself more money in the long run.
So
So,
say that. Wait, stop. Say that again. Can you repeat that sentence? Because that's really, really, really valuable.
okay, the part about rehabilitating your employee, because in the long run, it's going to cost you more money to replace them than it will to try and rehab them to fit into the culture or the process or the work that you have. One of the keys to being a good leader is being able to counsel. You know, from the whole gamut. From Louie, you did a great job on that project. To Louie, what did you learn from this? It's rehabilitating them to save you money in the long run.
So Dennis's term, for your listeners, Dennis's term is coach up, and I like that term, but it's the philosophy and it's the mindset around how quick are you throwing people away when you have the ability to rehabilitate them or coach them up. And again, I would suggest that Dennis has dropped a lot of wisdom today around the vision, mission, and principles. And when you have that clarity, you're going to know whether this person is somebody that you want to continue to invest your time and energy in, or whether it's time for them to go. And if it is time for them to go, it's going to be a lot more expensive at the end of the day, to Dennis's point. The other thing is Dennis, what would you recommend for our listeners when they're hiring people? How would you suggest they hold candidates up to that MVP, their mission, vision, and principles?
Well, we always talk about hiring people that are a good fit, but good fit implies that they're going to fit in, and there's not going to be that constructive criticism, that constructive feedback. You know, a good fit typically means go along to get along. You need to hire people that are willing to speak up. If you've created what I call a speak up culture, and you want to maintain that, you need to hire people that are willing to speak up. Oh, I saw this. Oh, that's a good point. We need to fix that. Or you came across pretty hard when you chided so and so out on the shop floor. That should have been done privately. You need to be able to take the criticism too. Creating that speak up culture is so important. And if there's any fit that you're trying to find with an employee when you're getting ready to hire them, it needs to be that fit where they're not afraid to speak up, where they're not afraid to challenge or be challenged, where they're willing to take feedback. Are they open to feedback? Because you're going to, when they come into an organization, I don't care if they're a master mechanic or a master pilot or whatever, they still have things to learn about the culture. Culture is the single thing that drives performance, the single most important thing, I should say, that drives performance.
And that goes back to your story earlier about the World Series, right? You can have a team of superstars, but if they're not connected and cohesive, then you're not going to win a World Series or any
Yeah,
championship.
Google did a study one time. They took all their top performers and put them on one team, and then they took a cross section of other team members and created a different team. And because of the egos involved with all the top performers, they performed worse than the team that was put together from a cross section of people. Some people refer to that as diversity. I think it's diversity of abilities, being able to bring people with different backgrounds and different perspectives on things allows you to build that synergy that creates that performance. I think there's a statistic from Harvard Business Review that disengaged employees, quiet quitters, are costing you 18% of your payroll in lost performance. And it's something that doesn't appear on a financial statement, but it's certainly something that if you create the right culture, imagine if that entire 18% were put on your profit line. That's a huge amount of money, no matter whether your business is 100,000 a year or 100 million a year. That's a lot of money, 18%.
You betcha. So, Dennis, as we start to close our time here, I have two questions that I'd like to ask. The first one is, if you could pick one book for our listeners, what's your favorite book that they should read on leadership?
Well, I'm a John Gordon certified trainer, and I would have to say his two books on the power of positive leadership and the power of a positive team are really good. A really good start on how to create that culture. So I give a plug to John Gordon on that, I guess.
Okay, so one of the reasons why Dennis was in the Air Force, because I asked for one, he gave me two. The next thing I'd like to ask is, I'd like you to share with our listeners, what's the biggest thing that you love most about what you do as a leadership coach? What's the one thing that you really love the most about your job?
I think it's when you're talking to a leader and they have that aha moment of, oh yeah, if I only tried doing that, if I I see how that might work, or I see how that will work. When they have that aha moment and they look at you and go, finally go something along the lines of, you're a lot smarter than you look. Of course, being a Marine, you probably get that all the time. You're a lot smarter than you look. Yeah.
Something like that. So, Dennis, if you could, please share with the audience if they'd like to reach out and connect with you, hire you to speak or come into their organization. How can they reach you?
Well, they can reach me at dennis@fullthrottleLeadership.com for one, or they can go to fullthrottleLeadership.com. And actually, there's a free gift there, 4 action items that you can implement today. It's my Elite Performance Blueprint. It's free. 4 things that you can implement and start seeing results within a matter of days, guaranteed. And they deal with what I was talking about earlier, those 4 C's: communication, connection, commitment, and caring. And they're ideas that you can implement in a matter of days and start seeing results almost immediately.
Thank you, Dennis, for such a generous offer to the audience. And again, would you share one more time the 4 C's that you're talking about that they can get for free?
It's communications, which leads to commitment, or connection, which leads to commitment and caring. And once you have those 4 C's implemented, you'll start seeing your team come together.
That's awesome. Again, thanks, Jet. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for your generosity. I always enjoy our conversations. And much like you said, I get to learn from people that I get to interview like you. So thank you for helping ramp up my knowledge and my wisdom. And thanks again I'm sure I'll see you soon at a networking event somewhere.
Thanks, Louie. I appreciate being here. And I have to say, for a Marine, you're pretty articulate. So.
Well, thank you, Dennis. And until next week, everybody, have a great week. And remember, what's one thing that you can take away from the conversation today with Dennis that you can implement to improve your leadership? Thanks, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks again for joining us and listening to this episode of Leadership and Love. I would like to challenge you to ask yourself, what's one thing that you heard today that you can implement immediately to improve your leadership and accelerate your growth. If you've gotten value out of this episode or learned something that you can implement today, we'd ask that you please share it with those that you care about. Our goal is to create more leaders who are leading with love.